Well, good morning, everyone. So glad you guys are at C3. So glad to be here with you this morning. As we begin today, I want to share something that is a strong conviction that I have. This is a belief that I hold to my very core. I think in the world, in this room, there are two kind of fundamental types of people. You're either one type or a second type. Now that sounds divisive, but I think we all fall into one of two categories. I think there are some of you here today that you can eat, and this is the first type of person, you can eat a bite of ice cream, like the most delicious ice cream, and you can go, that was delicious. I just needed a taste. That's all I need. Anyone like that in here? Like you can just be like, I just needed a little taste, just a little taste, just to get it. Anyone? I don't understand you. Like I love you. We can be friends. That doesn't make sense to me. Because here's the second type of person. By just reactions, I feel like most of us in the house are this type. If I take a bite of ice cream, just give me the gallon. Like that's what I want it all. It's like all or nothing. If a little bit of ice cream's good, a lot of ice cream is better. Anyone like that? Anyone else like that in the house? Absolutely. And there's some of you who don't like ice cream. You're not even a type of, I don't know what you are. You're from a different planet. I don't even know if we can be friends. You're just so different to me. But I'm like that with everything. Like I'm a person that if a little bit of something is good, a whole lot of it is better. If a little piece of pizza is good, like a whole big pizza is better. We went to Fred's yesterday up in Wheelersburg, and they were bringing those big 372-inch pizzas to the other booths next to it. I just want that whole pizza just for myself. But I'm like that in all aspects of my life. If we go and we hang out, maybe we go out to eat with our families, or we let the kids play a play date, I guess is what the kids call those today. I don't know, but we're hanging out. Families are hanging out. We're having a good time. We hang out for an hour. If it's fun, I'm like, let's keep going. Let's go 6 hours. Let's just hang out 6 hours. Let's make a weekend of it. Let's go to the mountains. We'll hang out. We'll camp. I tell you what, won't you just move next door and we'll just if something's good, I just want more and more and more. That's just the way I'm wired. I think it's why I often end up 350 pounds, just because I want more. If a little bit of Chex Mix is good, all the Chex Mix is good. My favorite TV show line was Ron Swanson when he orders, bring me all the bacon and eggs you have, and the guy goes to walk away, and he's like, stop, son, I think what you heard is bring me a lot of bacon and eggs. He said, what I actually want is you to bring all the bacon. That's me. I want everything. I just want more and more and more. Now, whether you're like that with food or with people or with money or whatever, all of us have our different things we just want more of. I think in general, most people that I talk to, most people that, when we get real about life, we want more out of life. Maybe you want more out of your relationships. You want more out of your job. You want more for your family. And it's not always selfish. You want more for those kids that you teach in school. You want more for those kids that you find out are living in rough situations. You want more for those that are struggling with addiction in our community. You want more out of your life. You want to make a difference in your life. You want more. We just want more for ourselves. We want more out of life. But the problem is, even as we're talking this series, raising the bar, how we want to raise the bar in our life, we get I want more out of life, but I don't feel like I have any more to give. I don't know if you can relate to that. But so often it's I want more, but I just don't have more to give. I don't have time. I don't have energy. I don't have money. I don't have any more to give. And I think so many of us fall into that where we want more, but we don't have any more to give. And we just feel like we never have enough. We feel like we don't have enough time. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough. We need more and more and more. And we just feel like we never quite have enough. But what I want to do today is I want to talk about a story in Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, where I think as we go through this story, I think it's going to give us some insights on, number one, why we don't feel like we ever have enough, and number two, what we can do to finally feel satisfied in our life. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 9, and we're going to start in verse 10. This is the story of when Jesus feeds 5,000 people. And you ever feed a big family? That's hard enough. Thanksgiving's coming up, maybe feed 10 or less. I don't know this year if we have to, whatever. But you feed a lot of people. That's tough to do. Here, Jesus feeds 5,000 people. And a little background to the story, Jesus just sent out the 12 disciples. There were 12 kind of his main disciples. He just sent them out on a short-term mission trip. He gave them some instructions that, hey, go to the different towns, different villages, tell them about the kingdom of God, tell them what I'm doing. You can heal people, you can do different things, but you go out and do that. And then we're going to, all 12 of you go do that, and then we're going to come back and we're going to kind of go go over. So they had just done that. They just had this amazing experience. They're doing all these amazing things. And here is when they kind of come back to tell Jesus about what happened. So we're going to start in verse 10. It says, when the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. Then he took them with him, and they withdrew by themselves to a town called Bethsaida. But the crowds learned about it and followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who needed healing. So in one of the other Gospels, if you're not familiar with the Gospels, at the beginning of the New Testament in the Bible, there are 4 books called the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they're written kind of about Jesus' life from 4 different perspectives. And this story is in each of these different books. And in another version of this story, that actually says Jesus takes them to Bethsaida because they're tired. They need to rest. They've had this big trip. You guys ever travel, or traveling can kind of take it out of you? If you've ever been on a mission trip, when you get back, you're just exhausted, just emotionally, just tired, just drained. So he kind of takes them to this remote place, kind of out by themselves. They're going to hang out, maybe eat. Maybe Jesus is going to grill them some fish or something. They're going to hang out, and they're going to tell Jesus about what happens. But instead of getting to have some bro time with their dude Jesus, instead of getting to relax and have a day off, instead the crowds find where Jesus is, they crowd around him, and Jesus starts preaching, teaching, healing like he always did. So basically this was supposed to be the disciples' day off, right? Like their day of rest, but instead it becomes another work day. Isn't that how the weekends usually become? Like you're supposed to have a day off, but then like the kids have to be here, and you got to clean this, and you got to do this, and you end up running more on the weekends, on your days off than you do when you're working. I'm a big proponent. I think we needed a day between Sunday and Monday, like where you just do nothing. I think that would be amazing. So that's what happens. They're all coming to him. Jesus is teaching. Jesus is healing. Then it says in verse 12, late in the afternoon, so it's becoming evening time. It's getting late. The 12 came to him and said, send the crowd away so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we are in a remote place here. Now, this sounds logical, right? This sounds like compassionate. Like these 12 people are out here. There's not like Chick-fil-A they can go to. They can't just go grab some food. This is a remote place. Jesus, send them away so that they can go get something to eat, so they can go stay there. Like, man, let's get them out of here. Like, let's think this through a little bit, right? Here's what Jesus' response was. Like, imagine being the disciples. There's literally, we'll find out later, there's 5,000 men. So some people think there's 10, 15, maybe 20,000 people. Like, we're like in the Joan C. Edwards Stadium right now. Like, just thousands and thousands of people just packed all around. And they're like, Jesus, we got to send these people away so they can go and eat. Now, imagine being the disciples, and Jesus looked at them and said this. He replied, verse 13, you give them something to eat. You feed them. Like, can you imagine? Like, you feed them. Like, I can't even feed my own family. Like, I can't even decide what we're going to eat tonight, let alone for 5,000 people. They're like, what, Jesus, what are you talking about? And basically, the disciples respond by saying, Jesus, we don't have enough. They answered, we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So they go around the entire crowd, including themselves, and all they have, we found out in one of the other Gospels, is this little boy's like Long John Silver's combo with like 12 hush puppies and 2 fish fillet. Like, that's all that they have. Like, how can we feed all these people? About 5,000 men were there. But he said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each, which might be the miracle of the whole story, that he got thousands of people to sit down in groups of 50. You teachers know that's like an act of God to get that to happen. But he says the disciples did so, and everyone sat down. Taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looking up to heaven, Jesus gave thanks, and he broke them. Remember that word, Jesus broke the bread. And then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. So they go, and Jesus takes like literally 5 loaves of bread. I think that's roughly 12 hush puppies if you use Long John Silver's math. But he breaks the bread, and they're passing them out. And this magical thing just happens. They just keep passing. They just keep passing until all the thousands and thousands of people said they all ate and were satisfied. This wasn't like one of those little fancy meals. You guys ever go to like a free, like, oh, we're going to give you free food and it's going to be fancy, and like the meat's like this big, and you get 1 green bean, and you got like a little dollop of mashed potatoes, and you have to go to McDonald's after the fancy meal. You guys ever do that? Just me? Maybe I'm just a pig. I don't know. But it wasn't one of those. All these people, they ate and they were satisfied. I think this was like the most delicious bread. Maybe it was Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits. I don't know, but it's like the most delicious bread. Are you guys hungry? Anyone else hungry? I don't know. I can't wait till lunchtime. But they were all satisfied, which doesn't make sense to me because I'm never full. Like I just want to keep eating, but they are all satisfied. Then check out this. It says, and the disciples. Now, a little pop quiz. I'm going to count to 3, and I want you to yell at me as loud as you can, not any curse words or anything like that. I want you to yell at me how many disciples there were. There's the blank disciples. Again, not cuss words, a number. So 1, 2, 3, tell me how many, just the number of disciples there are. 1, 2, 3. There are 12 disciples. Good job. You guys paid attention. In Sunday school, it said, so they all ate and were satisfied, and the 12 disciples picked up how many baskets? 12 baskets full of broken pieces that were left over. So let's think about this. When the disciples went around, they got food from everybody. Like this little boy is all the food they had. So they didn't have any food at the beginning, right? They didn't even have a meal to eat. Maybe that's why they were like, Jesus, can you send everyone out so we can go to like Dairy Queen and get a, like, what, like, can we go now? Like, we're getting hungry. We're tired. We're hungry. But yet at the end, there were 12 basketfuls left over, one for each of the disciples. They gave. They were willing to be generous, and God made sure that they had enough themselves. So what can we learn from this passage? What can we learn? And the thing that just really sticks out to me is this. We try to read a lot of things into things sometimes, but it's really simple as I read this passage. Number one, Jesus said to the disciples, you feed them. That was they were supposed to feed these people, feed 5,000 people, and you're like, yeah, go feed them. They were freaking out, and rightfully so, because you know what? They didn't have enough. They didn't have enough. If you go through the story, number one, they didn't have enough energy. They didn't have enough energy. They were tired. They were exhausted. They were wiped out. They needed rest. And I don't know about you, but some days I'm just like, I'm so tired. I just want to sit down. And it seems like if you're a parent, you know this. As soon as you sit down, it's like all of a sudden that's when the kid wants a bottle of water or a mac and cheese. Like, oh, I just sat down. Like, please let me just sit down. So many of us, especially in 2020, with all the stress and the craziness and just everything going on, and you got to worry about so many things we've never had to worry about before. It's just emotionally, just mentally draining. So many of us were exhausted. And we don't have enough energy, and we want more out of life, and we want to do more for the people around us. We want to serve God more. We want to be there for our families, but it's like, I just don't have enough energy. The disciples didn't have enough energy. The second thing, they didn't have enough time. It was getting late in the day. Even if they had all the energy in the world, even if there was a Sam's Club just down the road, they can go get 557 of the 24 box of Easy Mac, they didn't have enough time to pull this off. They didn't have the time to do what Jesus had asked them to do. And as I've gotten older, there is nothing in my life that I value besides relationships. I value time above all else. My time is worth more than money. My time is worth more than stuff. My time is so precious because we only have so much of it. We only have 168 hours a week. That's what we have, and who knows how many weeks we have on this earth. And time is precious, and there's never enough of it. There's always something to do. There's always somewhere to be. There's just always something. We never have enough time. And the disciples, they didn't have enough time to pull off what Jesus wanted them to do. And finally, and I don't know if anyone can relate to this, they said, Jesus, where are we going to get food? Even if we wanted to go and buy everyone food, there's 5,000 people, men. There's 15,000 people here. Where are we going to get the money? It's like a year's wages. That's like what we'd make in a year. Jesus, where do you expect us to get the money to pay for all of this? So does anyone else relate to the fact they didn't have enough money? There are these things that they wanted to do. There's things they wanted to see God do in people's lives, but we don't have the money to make it happen. So it's not this isn't like some magic, the disciples really didn't have enough. Jesus wasn't saying, why you guys are being ridiculous, go feed them. You have a warehouse in the backyard, you can go. They didn't have enough. So the disciples, rightfully so, they go to Jesus, and they had fallen into this trap, what I call the myth of more. The myth of more. They thought, and here's what they said, they thought, I need more to have enough. I don't have enough time, so I need more time. I don't have enough energy, I need more energy. I don't have enough money, I need more money. And that's what many of us fall into the trap of. We think if I don't have enough of something, I need more. If I want like a better relationship and I need more time, and I don't have enough time, it's like I need more time. Or I need more money to do what God wants me to do, to be generous in my life. God, you want me to be generous? I don't have enough money. God, I need more money. Or I need more time to do this. We fall into this idea, the myth of more. If I don't have enough, it means I have more. I need to have more. So here's what the disciples said. The disciples look at Jesus and say, we need more. We need more. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough energy. Jesus, if you want us to do what you've asked us to do, we need more. You know what Jesus responds? You don't need more. You need me. That was Jesus' response. Jesus says, you don't necessarily need more. Yes, you're right. You don't have enough. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough energy. You don't have the ability to pull this off yourself. If you want more, you need me. There's this crazy thing about Jesus, and I don't know why this is. But Jesus has this way that when we're generous, when we stop focusing on what we don't have, and instead we're generous with what we already do have, when we're generous with what we already have, Jesus has a way of making what we have enough. When you are generous with what you have, Jesus has a way of making what you have enough. And I remember growing up in church, when I first started, I became a Christian when I was like 14 or 15. And when I started preaching, I'd heard pastors for like 4 or 5 years. They would all, like every pastor I ever heard had this story of when, man, there's someone that had this widow had a need and her electric was getting turned off and it was $472 and she was going to get kicked out in the street. And the pastors would always say, I didn't have the money, we were broke, but we wrote her a check and we gave her money. And then by the time we got home, someone had stopped by the church building and gave us a check for $472, the exact amount. Like, anyone ever heard those church stories before? Anyone? Like, that's awesome, right? Like, I want that. So when I first started preaching, it's like, I need a story like that. Like, I can't just get up here and just tell stories about my dog. Like, that's not going to work. I need a good, like, pastor story. So I remember one day, I was working in Ashland when I was in college, and someone needed something. I can't remember the situation, but it was like for like $111 or something. I was working at the tennis center in Ashland. I was going to school, like barely had gas money. I had some people helping me, like really generous in my life, which was great. But I remember like someone needed something, so I was like, you know what? I don't got it, but I'm going to give it anyway. And I gave someone it was like $111, which was like thousands of dollars to me at the time. Like it was just an unfathomable amount of money. I remember, man, God's going to come through. So at the time, a lot of my mail was going to my grandfather's house, and whenever I get something that looked like it was important, he'd call me and say, hey, you got some mail here. You can stop by and pick it up, and I'd go and hang out with my grandpa, check my mail, that kind of stuff. So one day, it was like 3 days later, he calls me and say, hey, son, you got some mail here. It looks like a check. And I'm like, oh yeah, like this is it. This is like here's my preacher story. I'm gonna get money. I get it, and it was one of those like checks where you like paid a little bit too much, and like like Belk or some random place. Like I didn't shop at Belk, but it was like you get those like check like you paid too much. Here's your refund. I was like, this is gonna be it. I open it. I kid you not, hand on a Bible, 46 cents was how much it came through. It was like not what I had in mind, Jesus. Like I thought you were gonna but you know what I've learned? A lot of times it doesn't come. When you're generous with what you have, when you don't have a lot of money and you're generous anyway, or you don't have a lot of time and you're generous anyway, when you don't have a lot of energy and you're generous with that anyway, it doesn't always come back to you as money, as time, as energy, but it comes back as that sense of satisfaction, that joy, that peace that can only come from the Prince of Peace, that can only come from God and serving and loving other people. And you know what? I've always had enough money. And maybe I've gotten exhausted sometimes, but I've always had enough energy. I've always had enough time. I wish I had more, but this thing with Jesus is somehow when we're generous with what we have, Jesus makes sure that what we have is enough. Because here's what I say over and over, Jesus, here's what you want me to do. Well, Jesus, I need more. That's what I say. I said, I need more. But you know how he responds? You need me. You need me. Because here's the thing today. I'm not here to tell you that you just need to be smarter with your time or smarter with your money or get more rest. We probably all need to do that. I know I need to do that. There's some things that, there are some things that I feel like God wants me to do in my life. Here's what it is, and here's the resources I have, and it just doesn't match up. But let me tell you this. The person I've learned the most from around this idea is my wife. And I can speak a little more freely because she's not here. She was here the earlier one. Not that she would be offended, but she's introverted. My wife's really, really introverted. She's proud of that fact. So she doesn't like people talking about her, like the spotlight on her at all. But I've learned so much in this area from my wife. Because when we first got married, my wife's a teacher, guidance counselor. I've noticed that when you're a teacher, when you're a guidance counselor, you see a lot of hurting kids that maybe they don't have food at home. Maybe their home life is rough. Maybe they're just struggling to get by. They don't have the resources or the opportunities maybe other kids have. And that can be overwhelming. That can be like you ever have that situation where you see a need and you're like, man, my heart goes out to that, but it's just so overwhelming. Like I could try to do something, but it's just like a little drop in the bucket. There's nothing I can do to help all these kids do. And she can get overwhelmed by that because even though my wife's introverted and she can kind of come off like kind of distant or whatever sometimes, there's no one in this world that has a bigger heart than my wife. It's one of the reasons I love her so much. She just cares so much. Or I remember when we first we first got married, and I'm not one that like checks our bank account a lot. Like I check to make sure I have enough for like 7 Mexican pizzas at Taco Bell, and that's when I check I've talked a lot about food today. I feel like I'm hungry. I don't know. But yeah, amen. But that's the extent. Like I don't like. She's the frugal one. She can buy she buys whatever. Like if I can talk her into buying stuff, that's great because she just doesn't buy things for herself. Buy stuff for me and Isaac all day long, but not for herself. So it's not like I'm checking our bank account. But when we first got married, I would go and check to make sure we had money or whatever before I bought something, and I would notice there'd be like, here's $23 at Family Dollar, $22 at Dollar General. Like, you cheating on me at the Family Dollar? Like, what's going on? Like, you like that's a weird place to cheat on me, but whatever. So just one day I was like, just a joke, but one day I was like, hey, I just noticed you're not coming in the house with like Family Dollar. Like, are you getting snacks and not telling me? Like, where are we at here? And she's like, no, there's a kid and he didn't have shoes and he had some really old shoes, so I went and bought him pair of shoes. Or she would go, sometimes she'll go and buy some kids some clothes, or she keeps clothes in her office in case a kid needs it, or if a girl doesn't have a prom dress to go to prom, she'll take care of that. Or there have been situations on a Sunday afternoon on her day off when she's exhausted from like testing and all this different stuff, she'll go with another teacher and take a kid to a college 3 or 4 hours away so they can do an entrance exam. Like what I've learned from her is she can't take care of every kid and make life, change every kid's life and do everything that she can. Sometimes she doesn't know what to do to help in a situation, but you know what she does when she doesn't know what to do? She does something. When you don't know what to do, she just does something. And maybe she didn't have enough to fix all these problems, but what I've seen her do over and over and over again is she said, you know what, I don't have a lot, but I'm going to be generous with what we do have. And maybe no one else will ever notice, no one else will ever see, but it's just the right thing to do. And you know what? God's blessed us because even though we don't have a ton, but my wife does that, and you know what? We've always seemed to have enough, and God has blessed us over and over and over again in our life. And I'm looking, there are even faces that I see in this room that I see you've done the same thing. I've known many of you for like 10 years, and there's situations like, I don't have enough to do all this, but I can do something for these people. I don't have enough, but I'm going to be generous with what I do have. And that's the magic, not the magic, that's the grace of God, is that somehow when we're generous, we stop focusing on what we don't have, and we're generous with what we do have. God will make sure what we do have is enough. So as we finish up today, Tony's going to come up, and he's going to lead us through what traditionally a lot of us will call communion, or the Lord's Supper. In the early church, and remember I told you to remember a phrase, when Jesus broke the bread and they passed it to the disciples and they distributed it. In the early days, what the early church called communion was the breaking of the bread. They would get together and they would break bread. And what's fascinating was we talked about the 4 Gospels, these 4 perspectives of Jesus. Do you know there's only 2 miracles? 2 miracles. You guys remember all the miracles of Jesus? He turned water into wine. He healed people. He brought people back to life. He did all these like crazy, crazy things, exorcisms, all these crazy miracles Jesus did. You know there's only 2 miracles that are found in all 4 of the Gospels? You know what those 2 are? Number 1 is Jesus feeding the 5,000. Number 2, the resurrection. The only 2 miracles that are in all 4 of the Gospels. So there's something about this story that impacted those early Christians, something about this story that impacted the disciples. And I think as they thought about Jesus breaking the bread and over and over, there's just more and more. And they were able to give and still have some left over for themselves. I think they looked at this and looked at communion, the Lord's Supper, what we do to remember the sacrifice Jesus made for them. I think they looked at it like it was like a pre-runner a precursor to the communion, to the Lord's Supper. Whereas Christians, we take the bread and the juice to remember Jesus giving his life for us, but we also do it because that's a picture of the church. We come together as a church, and we break the bread and we take the bread, and then we're scattered, we're multiplied in this world, and maybe together, all of us together, we don't amount to much more than a Captain D's number 3 combo. Like, that's how much we're worth in this world. We don't have enough to fix the world's problems. We don't have enough to heal the hurts that are around us. But when we're together, when Jesus is in the middle of us and we're willing to step out and be generous with what we do have for God, God has a way of making that enough to turn the world upside down. So my challenge to you this morning, as we take the bread and we take the cup, not only remember what Jesus did for you when he died on the cross for you, but let it to be a reminder that when you're generous with what you do have, that the same one who died on the cross for your sin, allowed his body to be broken and his blood to be spilled for you, is the one that's providing for you day after day after day. And when you get tired, when you feel like you're out of time, when you feel like you don't have money, when you don't feel like you're enough, you can say, you know what, Jesus, I'm not enough. But Jesus, you are enough. Let communion to be a reminder that Jesus is enough and that we can live a life of satisfaction. We can be satisfied because of Jesus' sacrifice. If you guys would pray with me as we get ready to take communion. Heavenly Father, God, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to be here gathered as a church today. And I thank you as we take of the cup and we take of the bread, God, that we would remember your sacrifice for us, but we'd also remember your provision. Remember that no matter how little we feel like we have, how many times we say, God, I don't have enough, I'm not enough. God, we can rest in the fact that you are enough. And what you did for us on the cross is enough. And we can be generous with what we have, because you'll see to it that what we have is enough in you. So God, I pray for these next few moments as we take communion, God. It would remind us of our mission, remind us of our purpose, and it would remind us of your incredible grace toward us. We ask all this in your Son's name.